Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining our Diversity Specialized Predoctoral to Postdoctoral Advancement in Neuroscience, or affectionately shortened to DSPAN Award Open House. Just to get us started, we have a few housekeeping items. So we do have a captioner here that's writing out the live captions. Please do note that this meeting is being recorded. At least the presentation portion will be recorded. And we'll provide all the slides that we present today and a lot of resources and materials after the webinar. So you'll have those ready for you. If you have questions for the presentation, you can post them in the chat, but please note that the second half of this whole hour will be all about, meeting NIH staff. As I mentioned in the email, we have a ton of breakout rooms where you can meet different institute staff and ask your DSPAN specific questions and learn about different NIH. So we'll have all your questions answered in the breakout rooms, and the breakout rooms will not. So again, just a very brief outline of the webinar. We will introduce the DSPAN program, specifically the F99 to 0 application process. We'll go over some considerations for review, and then we'll open up breakout rooms where you can meet our NIH and NINDS staff. With that, we have 3 speakers today. Dr. Michelle Jones-London and Dr. Lauren Ulrich are managing the DSPAN Award. They are in the Office of Programs to Enhance Neuroscience Workforce Diversity, or Open Office at NINDS. And we have Dr. Ashley Vontier here as well from NIMH. So with that, I will pass it off to Dr. Michelle Jones-London to get it started.
Thank you, Dr. Ibrahimi. So welcome. I'm excited to talk to you today about the DSPAN. And really, the DSPAN, the name sort of says it all. It really is a program created to span career stages with an eye in mind of really encouraging and retaining outstanding, diverse graduate students who have demonstrated the ability and interest in careers as independent neuroscience researchers. What we know is that at each step along your career pathway, there is a rethinking about, should I remain in academia or should I remain doing neuroscience research? And what this program is designed for is to really help those who consider research as their passion and something that they really want to pursue in terms of a pathway, is to minimize those transition barriers, really focus on enhancing mentorship. And a wonderful outcome of receiving this award is really the community that you will be a part of within the DSPAN. In terms of how we fund the program, it's a dual-phased funding. So if you're interested in this program, you are saying that at the time of a potential award, you're going to have 1 to 2 years left of completing your PhD dissertation research. That's the F99 portion, and that you're currently at a US institution. With the award, if awarded, you would also receive up to 4 years of support for postdoctoral training, and that's the K00 part, and that would be at also any US institution. So the timeline is 1 to 2 years for the F99, you're a graduate student finishing up, and then after the PhD defense, 4 years of the K00 for your postdoctoral fellowship phase. With regards to scientific focus, you'll notice in the Zoom we have with us today, not only NINDS, which is the institute that I represent, but several other neuroscience research focused, or not research focused, but neuroscience institutes, or institutes that have neuroscience in their portfolios. These are institutes that at NIH that are either a part of the Blueprint, which is a collaborative effort of about 13 neuroscience research institutes, or the BRAIN initiative at the NIH. And so on the right part of the slide, you'll see several of the names of the ICs, and really note that what we're talking about this program, and one of the other strengths of this program, is the broad representation of neuroscience that anyone who's applying can be conducting research currently and moving into for their postdoc phase. Of note is that NIDCD, who is also with us today, their participation is limited to the BRAIN Initiative research areas only. So if you feel as though your research is NIDCD, you definitely will want to use the time today to talk to them in their breakout room. So really showing you the collaboration and the strength of the Neuroscience Institutes. When it comes to you as the person applying or the PD, PI, we really are looking for graduate students from diverse backgrounds to be a part of the people that apply for this. This includes those nationally underrepresented in neuroscience research. And you can always refer to the NIH's Interest in Diversity, a notice that is published. With regards to applicants, we've already talked about the timeline, and it's really important. This award is specifically designed to be a transitional award. So you must have 1 to 2 years left in the PhD at the time of award. And you can use the tentative dates or start dates that are published in all the NOFOs to sort of go back and backdate. In terms of who applies for this, usually it's 3rd or 4th year PhD students, but that's okay. Part of the inclusiveness and diversity of this program is the realization that life happens, and sometimes people don't always have a perfect linear pathway. And so if you are after the 3rd or 4th year, say you're a 5th year, don't take yourself out of the running. Really reach out, talk to us. And there can be specific reasons why, critical life events, why your timeline just doesn't look the same. The one thing that is absolute is that you must be at the dissertation phase within your graduate program. The program is also limited to US citizens or permanent residents. And unfortunately, you cannot be in a clinical health professional or dual degree program. That would mean that you're not going straight to the postdoc, that you would be taking time off for your residency or there's some type of programming. And that really just isn't a fit for the D-SPAN. But once again, talk to us. We may be able to guide you to other programs that are a more appropriate fit. Another question that we get a lot is, if I'm already on a T32 or an F31, can I apply to this? And the answer is an enthusiastic yes. If you are a T32 appointee or an F31 awardee, you are still eligible. And as I sort of touched on with the scientific areas of the different ICs, the thing that is adamant here is also that both phases, the F99 and the K00, must have mission relevance to one of the neuroscience institutes listed on the NOFO. So for example, you can't just be doing neuroscience now and then maybe moving into more cancer type research. It doesn't work like that. Both phases have to be within neuroscience. But as I said, lucky for you, neuroscience is a very big space and very broad. For transition from the F99 to the K00, the F99 phase must be at least 1 year. We often get asked, can I get just the K00 if I'm already about to finish up in 3 months? The answer is no. The F99 phase must be at least 1 year, but no more than 2 years. Except in unusual circumstances, the F99 phase will not be extended. The transition from the F99 to the K00 is not automatic. You will actually submit an administrative, what we call an administrative application to us, and the K00 application would then be reviewed. To activate the K00 phase, you must also have been accepted into a neuroscience-focused postdoctoral research position. And with that, I'll turn it over to Dr. Ulrich to go deeper into the application components.
All right, thank you, Dr. Jones-London. So I'm just going to go through a couple of the highlights about the application itself, but please do check out our previous webinars. We have a couple of them up on the DSPAN webpage and the Blueprint website, and they go into much greater detail about the DSPAN application itself. Before you start any NIH application that's in sort of the training, career development, fellowship realm, we do recommend this general framework of starting at the end. So really thinking about what are your career goals and what is the area of research interest. So for the DSPAN award, that's 5 to 6 years down the road when you're 4 years into your postdoc and you're thinking about what that faculty application is going to look like, what's that chalk talk going to look like, and sort of starting from there. Because then you'll have a little bit of an idea of what kinds of things you will need in order to succeed in that career goal. What kinds of techniques, skills, knowledge, even relationships are you going to need at that point in time, 6, 7 years from now. And then, because starting at the end, then you can say, which skills do I already have? And what skills do I need to be developed? So then you have that gap that this application is trying to fill. And in particular for DSPAN, you really kind of have 2 gaps. You have the graduate work, and then you have the postdoctoral work. And once you've defined what skills you still need to develop, you can kind of slot those into the 2 different phases of the application. Specifically for the research plan, you want to think about how these 2 phases of your research in the F99 and K00 phases will build off your existing strengths and provide you with all of these skills and techniques and data that you're going to need in your subsequent career stages. Then you also need a training plan that's going to be tailored to those needs. And what activities are you going to perform in each of the phases to develop your professional skills and start thinking about a really detailed timeline for your training goals. And lastly, you can think about what kind of guidance or mentorship you need. So you'll always have a sponsor, but then you also might have a co-sponsor, collaborators, consultants, maybe even an advisory committee in both phases of your application. Just in generally, I already mentioned the resources, please use them. In addition to webinars, we have tip sheets and various other information about the NOFO and about the program. We always recommend that you read the entire NOFO, even all the legalese, because sometimes there is stuff buried in there that is really important. But I will highlight in particular the review criteria, because those are the questions that reviewers are asking themselves as they put together their summary statement and review. And that is a crucial piece to make sure the answer to every one of those review criteria is somewhere in your application, hopefully multiple places, because redundancy is your friend. Read the fellowship instructions and the SF424 application guide. And of course, these are going to be the generic fellowship instructions. In general, we follow the F32 instructions unless they otherwise mentioned in the NOFO. So the NOFO always supersedes the generic instructions. For the applicant, in general, the questions the reviewers are asking themselves is, given the applicant's prior training record, their stated goals and the proposed training plan, the referee's evaluations, the graduate research plan, and the postdoc research direction, is it reasonable to expect that that applicant will be ready to transition to a postdoc in 1 to 2 years? And will they be prepared to successfully implement that strong postdoctoral research project? And then secondly, does the applicant demonstrate that commitment to a neuroscience research career, an independent neuroscience research career in the future? And so the place for you to shine is really the applicant's background and career goals section. And then there's also the bio sketch, where you can talk about other factors that might have affected your progress. And then, of course, the research plan itself is another place for you to shine. When thinking about the sponsor and the mentor, in the F99 phase, the mentor should have a strong track record in training and transitioning graduate students to successful postdoc positions. If you have a mentor that is relatively junior and hasn't graduated any PhD students yet, we often recommend that you consider having a co-sponsor that does have that experience. And this isn't to, punish the sponsor or say that they can't train you well, but just thinking about having someone who has had that experience and has sort of seen it before can be helpful. And it can also just be helpful in general for you as a student to have more than one person that you can go to that's sort of on your team. The second thing that we consider is, does the mentor outline a comprehensive, individualized plan to support the applicant, keeping in mind their strengths and any gaps in needed skills? And is there a plan to specifically facilitate their transition to the postdoc phase? And so we've bolded a couple of things here because individualized, that's one question we get a lot, because, oh, well, all graduate students get the same training, so how can mine be individualized? And our answer to that is that in general, graduate students will have the same types of components. You're all going to go to a journal club, publish a paper, go to conferences, but which journal club, which papers, which conferences, those are going to be individualized. And so in your training plan, there should be an answer to why that kind of journal club, why are you going to that conference? And that's really the most important part, is the why. Again, going back to sort of that gap analysis, so really making the case for why this training is needed. Why do you need 1 to 2 more years in graduate school? And then how is the sponsor in particular going to help you identify a postdoctoral mentor that is really going to help advance your career goals? If you have more than one mentor, they should clearly describe how they're going to coordinate mentoring you. For the K00 phase, you do not need to identify or name a specific mentor. You should describe an appropriate set of qualifications and attributes for the mentor and how they will be identified. So you might think there's a whole bunch of different kinds of qualifications. It might be the kind of research they're doing. It might even be the kind of access to resources that the institution has. And it could be something even, I want to have a junior faculty or somebody with a large lab, or whatever it is, whatever is important to you that you are looking for in your career advancement, you should specify that in your application. In terms of the specific aims page, you must use these 2 specific aims. The first is about your dissertation research project, and the second is about the postdoctoral research direction. I'll go into more detail. For aim 1, you need the significance, including an overview of the research, a clearly stated rationale and hypothesis, going beyond simply experimental details and providing more perspective about expected outcomes and significance. And then in the approach, there should be a progress report on what you've done so far in the dissertation research project, and then a detailed research proposal for the work left to be done in the 1 to 2 years of the F99 phase for research and career development milestones for the transition from the F99 to the K00. It is very important that you pay close attention to the caveats and the alternative approaches. So oftentimes reviewers do ask, well, what if they don't get the results that they expect? Or what if this methodology doesn't work out? And oftentimes the alternative approaches section is a little bit thinner than we'd like. So you really want to give reviewers the confidence that no matter what happens in the research, that you'll you have a plan to figure it out and graduate within the 1 to 2 years. For the second aim, the postdoctoral research direction, you want to talk in the significance section about a specific scientific question or observation that you are interested in investigating, and really explaining the significance and the rationale. You do not have to just do a continuation of your F99 phase. In fact, you probably shouldn't. You should be getting, a broader training and doing something different in the postdoc, but it should have a logical connection to the previous research. So thinking about, even if you really, you're changing model systems, you're changing topic areas, like maybe you do want to do something very different in the postdoc phase, there still will be something that you have learned in graduate school and some reason why. Maybe it's something you learned about yourself and your research interests that's going to give you the connection to the postdoc phase. And there might be things that you can be doing during the graduate phase to sort of prep you for the K00. So really drawing those lines for the reviewers instead of just having these like two completely different research areas. The K00 phase must also have relevance to one of the participating NIH Blueprint or BRAIN institutes or centers or offices. For the approach, you want to provide a general description of how the research will be conducted, the kinds of approaches and methodologies that you're interested in using or gaining experience in, some anticipated results, and maybe some challenges that might arise when pursuing this research. And of course, you don't know where you're going to be. You don't know which lab, what kind of resources they'll have. So it can be, in broad strokes, but it should show that you've thought about this research question and that you are familiar with the kinds of outstanding questions there are in the field. You should also talk about career and professional development skills that you're interested in acquiring in the postdoc phase. And again, you don't have to identify a specific mentor, but you do need a plan for identifying the mentor. And remember, your sponsor also has to talk about how they will help you identify that postdoc mentor. For the research strategy section, I already went through that you want to talk about significance and approach for each of the aims. Make sure that these aims do relate back to your career goals. And just in general, you want to be taking a sort of a broad, comprehensive viewpoint and use a narrative style. And then again, those review criteria really are important. Additional considerations for the application is really the emphasis of the proposal should be on the training plan, the mentors and collaborators who are going to assist in the training, as well as how this thesis research training is going to prepare you for your future career development. So really continually connecting every single piece of the application back to those future career goals. Be sure to check for grammatical errors and typos, because those things can really stick in reviewers' craws. And we become blind to them as we're writing, right? So we always say, have someone unfamiliar with your research proof for grantsmanship, for unambiguous sentences or statements, for even for whether someone, sort of slightly outside of your field of neuroscience will understand it, because it is a broad review panel that reviews these applications. When you're putting together your career activities, think about what purpose each of the activities serves. And you don't need to include every single little thing you're doing. So if it seems unnecessary or irrelevant, you don't have to include it in your application. Again, try to avoid a quote unquote generic plan, and the why of why you're doing these activities and how they're going to advance you towards your career goal is the most important. And also be specific, right? Don't say I'm going to go present at a conference, but list the specific conference. make sure that the mentor and mentee sections match up. If you talk in your section on and on and on about how much you want to get teaching experience and your mentor doesn't mention it at all, then that's a red flag. And reviewers wonder, does the mentor really know the mentee? Are they talking to each other? Are they being honest with what their career goals are? And definitely, we always recommend, getting advice from people with experience in NIH fellowships and even DSPAN applications in particular, but we do not recommend just copying a successful training plan because each person has a different background, is pursuing different goals, and the most effective applications are written in your voice and not someone else's. And we have definitely seen applications that they've copied the format, but they didn't copy that special sauce of like what really made the application compelling. So again, always try to get that outside feedback to see if you're really accomplishing the, getting across what you want to getting across. And lastly, please do submit a letter of intent. It's due 30 days before the application due date, and all the information is in the NOFO, but this helps us plan review. And just want to be sure that everyone in this call knows that more than one person may apply from any given institution. So there is no limit on the number of applications per round from a given institution. And now I will turn it over to Dr. Van Veer to go through some last information about review.
Thanks, Dr. Ulrich. So just a few more slides here, and then we'll get you to the breakout rooms. So you went over, or Dr. Ulrich went over what the components of the application are going to be. So you take your time, you put this application together, and then you have your full draft. When you have this document and you've had it reviewed by hopefully your friends and colleagues and obviously your sponsors or mentors, then another component to check is whether you really addressed all of those review criteria that we just discussed that are in section 5 of the funding announcement. So go back to that announcement, look at section 5 specifically, and make sure that everything you put in your application is addressing those scored review criteria that are explicitly outlined in the announcement. And because that's exactly what the reviewers are using when they're assessing your application and scoring it. And again, they're applicant, sponsors, collaborators, and consultants, research training plan, training potential and development plan, and institutional environment and commitment to training. When you submit the application, there are some additional forms that go along with that, including this PHS submission form. So a question that comes up specifically is whether you need to request a specific study section or institute when you fill out the form and submit your application. And for this opportunity, you do not need to request anything. All of the applications are reviewed in one study section, and they're all initially assigned to NINDS. So you can just forget about that part when you submit. So because also they're all reviewed by one study section, it's going to encompass basically like all of anything anyone can do in neuroscience. So it's a very diverse panel of neuroscience experts. So again, in thinking about when you're putting your application together, you want to make sure that what you're writing is going to connect with people with a variety of backgrounds in neuroscience. Don't make it too specific for experts in your particular field. And then finally, after you submit your application, you have one more opportunity to give a little more information prior to the review, and that's through post-submission materials. It's very limited in the material that you can provide for this, though. You can contact the scientific review officer that will be coordinating the review of your application. The materials need to be provided to this person 30 days prior to the scheduled review meeting. And this is a list of what is allowable because, as I said, it's very limited. So if there's news of an accepted publication since you submitted, you can provide an update to the committee about that if your sponsor has new funding. If there are changes you had to make in your mentor because, for instance, your primary mentor actually left for industry and you had to move to a different lab with different oversight. Obviously, we don't want to penalize you in the review process, so you'll have the ability to change the mentor or other key people that you've identified in the application because of circumstances that are outside of your control. And then again, the relevant bio sketches because of that, and letters of support if they provided one, and then that person, can no longer be part of your application. So I see Michelle put in the chat who the review officer is for these applications, and she'll be in one of the breakout rooms. So if you have other questions, but just know that you can follow up with the review officer and they'll tell you the process for submitting this information and the deadline. So we're going to open up the breakout rooms now. Just a quick overview of the different rooms we have available. There's going to be 2 rooms just to spread the questions out about DSPAN specifically. So all the components that we've discussed and what's in the chat. If you have specific questions about this funding opportunity, go to number 1 or 2. And then we'll also have rooms to discuss the NINDS postdoctoral NRSA F32, one for the general NIH F31. If you're an earlier stage graduate student, you might be interested in that, and the diversity F31. And then we have representatives from a bunch of institutes across NIH that support neuroscience research, and also the BRAIN initiative. If you have questions there, everyone should have an institute that their research aligns with. If you don't know what that would be, just go to one of these rooms and we'll help you figure it out and connect you with the right person.